I sat in the leather chair between my siblings, still wearing the black dress from our mother's funeral that morning, watching Miguel Santos shuffle through the papers that would determine our family's future. The law office smelled like old books and expensive cologne. Gabriel sat to my right, adjusting his designer suit and checking his Rolex like he had somewhere more important to be. Isabella sat to my left, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue even though I hadn't seen her shed a single real tear all day. "Thank you all for coming during this difficult time," Miguel said, his voice carrying the practiced sympathy of a man who'd read hundreds of these documents. "Your mother was very specific about her final wishes." I folded my hands in my lap and waited. For 3 years, I'd been waiting for this moment. Miguel opened the official-looking folder and began reading in his formal lawyer voice. "I, Elena Martinez, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath my assets as follows." Gabriel leaned forward slightly, and I could see him trying to hide a smile. Isabella stopped her fake crying and focused intently on Miguel's words. "To my son, Gabriel Martinez, I leave 70% of Martinez Restaurant Holdings, including all current locations, real estate, and business assets." Gabriel's smile broke through despite his attempt to look solemn. 70%, he repeated quietly, like he was testing how the words sounded. "To my daughter, Isabella Martinez, I leave 25% of Martinez Restaurant Holdings, along with full control of all marketing and social media operations." Isabella gasped and put her hand to her chest like she was surprised, but I saw the satisfied glint in her eyes. "Oh my," she whispered. "Mama was so generous." I continued sitting perfectly still, even though my heart was beating fast, not from sadness or shock, but from anticipation. "And to my daughter, Sofia Martinez," Miguel continued, "I leave 5% of Martinez Restaurant Holdings and the contents of the family safety deposit box. 5%. Of the empire my mother built from a single food truck. 5% of the $50 million business I'd helped run for the past decade." Gabriel and Isabella tried to look sympathetic, but they couldn't hide their satisfaction. They probably thought I'd start crying or protesting the unfairness of it all. Instead, I reached into my black leather purse and pulled out a thick manila folder, the same folder I'd been carrying everywhere for the past month, waiting for exactly this moment. I placed it calmly on the polished conference table in front of Miguel. "Before you two celebrate," I said quietly, looking directly at Gabriel and then Isabella, "you might want to see what I've been collecting for the past 3 years." The room went completely silent. Gabriel's smile faded, and Isabella stopped dabbing at her eyes. Miguel looked confused. "Sofia, what is this?" "Evidence," I said simply, opening the folder to reveal hundreds of pages of documents, photographs, and printed emails. "Evidence that this will is forged. Evidence that our mother was systematically poisoned. Evidence that Gabriel has been stealing from the business for 2 years. And evidence that Isabella helped him do it." Gabriel's face went white. "Sofia, what are you talking about? You're grieving and confused." "I'm talking about the shell companies you created to buy our restaurants at below market value," I interrupted, pulling out a financial report. "I'm talking about the prescription medications Isabella has been putting in Mama's food for 18 months. I'm talking about how you convinced Dr. Patterson to falsify medical records by paying him $50,000. Isabella shot to her feet. "That's insane. You can't prove any of that." I looked up at her calmly and pulled out a small digital recorder. "Actually, I can. This contains recordings of you and Gabriel planning Mama's final accident 2 weeks ago. You discussed increasing the medication dosage to make sure she died before she could change her will again." The color drained from Isabella's face as I pressed play. Our voices filled the room, Gabriel and Isabella discussing how much longer they'd have to wait, Isabella complaining about having to take care of the old woman, and Gabriel reassuring her that it would all be over soon. Miguel stared at the recorder like it was a bomb. "Sofia, are you saying your mother was murdered?" "I'm saying my siblings have been murdering her slowly for almost 2 years," I replied. And they forged this will because they knew Mama discovered what they were doing. She changed her real will 3 weeks before she died. I have that one too. Gabriel lunged forward, trying to grab the folder. You're lying. I didn't flinch. The FBI received copies of everything this morning, Gabriel. So did the police, the district attorney, and 3 investigative journalists. For the first time in my life, I watched my siblings realize they'd underestimated their weak sister, and it felt like justice. Growing up, I used to think every family worked the way ours did. I thought it was normal for the oldest child to be treated like royalty while the middle child became invisible. Gabriel was everything our parents wanted in a son. Even as a little boy, he had this natural confidence that made adults pay attention when he spoke. At family dinners, he'd tell stories about school, and Mama and Papa would hang on every word like he was revealing the secrets of the universe. Gabriel is going to be a lawyer someday. Mama would tell everyone who visited our tiny apartment above the restaurant. He's so smart, so well-spoken. He's going to take care of this whole family. I was 7 when she started saying that. Gabriel was 11 and already acting like he owned the world. Isabella came along when I was 4, and from the moment she drew her first breath, she was the princess of our family. Beautiful, charming, and blessed with the kind of smile that made strangers give her free candy at the grocery store. Look at our little angel, Papa would say, bouncing Isabella on his knee while Gabriel and I sat nearby. She's going to break hearts someday. And me? I was just there. The quiet one. The middle child who got good grades but never caused any excitement. When people asked Mama about her children, she'd light up talking about Gabriel's academic achievements and Isabella's latest cute saying. If they specifically asked about me, she'd pause for a second like she was trying to remember, then say, "Oh, Sophia's a good girl, very helpful." Helpful. That was my identity from as far back as I can remember. Our mother built her restaurant empire through pure determination and backbreaking work. She started with a food truck parked outside construction sites, serving authentic Mexican food to workers who missed home cooking. I remember helping her prep vegetables in our kitchen at 5 a.m. before school, my small hands struggling to keep up with her practiced movements. "Work hard, mija," she'd tell me while Gabriel slept in and Isabella was too young to help. Success doesn't come to those who wait for it. By the time I was 12, Mama had saved enough to open our first real restaurant. Gabriel was 16 and already talking about law school, while Isabella, at 8, was taking dance classes that cost more than most families spent on groceries. I spent my afternoons and weekends at the restaurant, helping Mama with inventory, learning the business from the ground up. Gabriel would stop by occasionally to eat free food and tell Mama about his latest achievements. Isabella would come by to charm the customers and get showered with compliments about how beautiful she was. But I was the one who stayed late helping Mama count the register, who listened when she worried about cash flow, who held her hand when she cried from exhaustion after 18-hour days. "You're my steady one," she'd whisper on those hard nights. I don't know what I'd do without my Sophia. I treasured those moments, those rare times when I felt like I mattered as much as my siblings. The dynamic between Gabriel and Isabella was strange from early on. Most siblings that far apart in age don't have much in common, but they formed this secret alliance against me that I never understood. At family game nights, they'd team up even when the game wasn't supposed to have teams. During family discussions, they'd support each other's opinions and dismiss mine. When we got in trouble together, somehow I was always the one who got blamed while they backed each other up. "Sophia's just sensitive," Gabriel would say when I complained about their treatment. "She takes everything too personally." "Yeah," Isabella would agree, even when she was barely 10 years old. "Sophia's dramatic." As we got older, the pattern intensified. Gabriel went to law school on a full scholarship while I attended community college and worked at the restaurant. Isabella went to a prestigious private college for communications while I transferred to finish my degree at night school. Gabriel graduated and joined a top law firm. Isabella launched her social media career and quickly gained hundreds of thousands of followers. And I became the family's administrative assistant, handling the paperwork no one else wanted to do. At family gatherings, Gabriel would hold court talking about his important cases and influential clients. Isabella would show everyone her latest viral videos and brand partnerships. I'd sit quietly, helping Mama serve food and clean up afterward. Everyone assumed I was content with my role. The helpful daughter, the reliable one, the forgotten middle child who'd found her place in the background. What they didn't know was that I was watching everything, learning everything, and remembering everything. Because sometimes the person you overlook is the most dangerous person in the room. 2 years ago, my mother was unstoppable. At 60, Mama could work circles around people half her age. She'd arrive at the flagship restaurant by 6 a.m., review the previous day's numbers, check inventory, and still have energy to personally greet the lunch rush customers who'd been coming to her restaurants for decades. "Buenos dias, Mrs. Rodriguez," she'd call out to regulars, remembering not just their names but their usual orders and how their grandchildren were doing in school. "The usual table for you today?" Mama's mind was sharp as a blade. She could calculate food costs in her head faster than I could with a calculator, remember every vendor's delivery schedule, and spot financial discrepancies from across the room. That's why I noticed immediately when things started to change. It began with small things that made no sense. Mama would forget appointments she'd made the day before. She'd call the same vendor twice to place the same order. She'd stand in the middle of the kitchen looking confused, like she couldn't remember why she'd walked in there. Maybe she's just tired, I told myself at first. She's been working so hard for so many years, but the incidents got worse and more frequent. One afternoon, I found Mama staring at the cash register like she'd never seen it before. "Mija," she said quietly, How do I make this work?" My heart broke watching this brilliant woman struggle with a machine she'd operated thousands of times. I showed her step by step, and she followed along like a confused child. That's when Gabriel started showing up more often. "I'm worried about Mama," he said during one of his unexpected visits to the restaurant. "She seems different lately." "I've noticed it too," I admitted. "Maybe she should see a doctor." "I think that's a good idea. But in the meantime, maybe I should help out more with the business decisions, to take some pressure off her." It seemed reasonable. Gabriel was a successful lawyer with business experience. If Mama was struggling, why shouldn't her eldest son step in to help? Isabella started visiting more frequently too, which initially made me happy. For years, she'd been too busy with her social media career to spend much time with the family. "Poor Mama," Isabella would say, stroking our mother's hair while Mama sat looking dazed and exhausted. "She's been working too hard for too long. She needs to rest more." Isabella began bringing Mama homemade meals, beautifully presented and photographed for her social media accounts. "Taking care of my beautiful mother," she'd caption the posts, showing herself spoon-feeding Mama like she was an invalid. At first, I was grateful for Isabella's attention. Mama seemed to enjoy the special meals and the extra care, but I started noticing that Mama's confusion was worse on the days after Isabella's visits. "I feel so tired, Mija," Mama would tell me, rubbing her temples. "Everything feels fuzzy." "Maybe you should see Dr. Patterson," I suggested. "Gabriel already made me an appointment," she said, which surprised me since I didn't know Gabriel had been talking to her about medical issues. Dr. Patterson had been our family physician for 15 years. He'd delivered Isabella, treated our childhood injuries, and helped Mama through Papa's heart attack scare 5 years earlier. We trusted him completely. After Mama's appointment, Gabriel called a family meeting. "Dr. Patterson is concerned about Mama's cognitive function," he announced solemnly. "He thinks she might be developing early-onset dementia." The words hit me like a physical blow. "That's impossible, she's only 60. "It's rare, but it happens," Gabriel said. "The doctor wants to run more tests, but the symptoms are pretty clear. Memory loss, confusion, difficulty with familiar tasks." I looked at Mama, who was sitting quietly in her chair looking smaller and frailer than I'd ever seen her. When had she gotten so thin? When had those deep lines appeared around her eyes? "What does this mean for the business?" Isabella asked, and I shot her a look. How could she think about business when our mother was sick? "It means Mama needs to step back from daily operations," Gabriel said gently. "The stress of running the restaurants is probably making her condition worse." Over the following months, I watched my brilliant, strong mother fade away piece by piece. Some days she'd seem almost normal, laughing at my jokes and giving me business advice. Other days, she wouldn't recognize longtime employees or would forget where she'd put important documents. Gabriel gradually took over more responsibilities, always presenting it as temporary measures to help Mama recover. Isabella spent more time at the house, cooking for Mama and documenting her journey for her followers who praised her devotion. And I felt helpless. I was watching the most important person in my life disappear, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I never suspected that my own siblings were the ones making it happen. Not until it was almost too late. Gabriel's law degree became a weapon, and I watched him use it to systematically dismantle everything our mother had built. It started with papers. Always papers. "Sophia, I need you to witness Mama's signature on these documents," Gabriel would say, spreading legal forms across the dining room table like he was conducting important business. "Just standard power of attorney stuff so I can help her with banking when she's having bad days." I watched Mama sign her name in shaky handwriting, not really understanding what she was agreeing to. Gabriel was patient and gentle, explaining each document like he was protecting her interests. "This just means I can pay the restaurant bills when you're not feeling well," he'd say soothingly. "And this one lets me talk to the accountants about the books so you don't have to worry about the complicated financial stuff." Within 3 months, Gabriel had legal authority over every aspect of the business. The changes started small. Gabriel would show up at the flagship restaurant during my shift and casually mention that he'd restructured my responsibilities. "I'm moving you to general administrative work," he explained one Tuesday morning. "Isabella is going to take over marketing and social media coordination. She has a real gift for that stuff, and with her online following, she can bring in younger customers." Isabella arrived that afternoon with a fancy new title, creative director, and a salary that was triple what I'd been making. She set up in the office that used to be mine, decorated it with ring lights and cameras for her content creation, and immediately started treating the longtime employees like they worked for her. "We need to update the aesthetic," she announced during her first staff meeting. "Everything needs to be more Instagram-worthy. I'm thinking about changing the uniforms, maybe adding some neon lighting, definitely getting better plates for food photography." Our mother had chosen every detail of those restaurants with care. The warm lighting that made families feel welcome, the traditional plates that reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen in Mexico, the uniforms that were practical and professional. Isabella was talking about turning it all into a backdrop for her social media content, but the aesthetic changes were nothing compared to what Gabriel was doing behind the scenes. I first noticed it when I was processing vendor payments and saw invoices for companies I'd never heard of: Stellar Property Management, Golden West Consulting, Pacific Coast Holdings. "Gabriel, what are these companies?" I asked, showing him the invoices during one of his visits. "New service providers," he said without looking up from his phone. "I renegotiated some of our contracts to get better rates. We're saving thousands every month." But when I looked closer at the numbers, we weren't saving money. We were paying more to these mysterious companies than we'd ever paid to our previous vendors. I started keeping copies of everything. Then Gabriel announced that we were streamlining operations by selling 3 of our smaller restaurant locations. "Mama agreed it makes sense," he told the staff at those locations. "These properties have peaked in value, and we can use the capital to expand our flagship locations." The buyers were Stellar Property Management and Pacific Coast Holdings, the same companies we were suddenly paying for consulting services. I ran the property records during my lunch break. Gabriel's name was listed as the principal owner of both companies. My brother was buying our family's restaurants for himself, using our mother's compromised mental state to authorize the sales. But it got worse. Gabriel restructured our insurance policies, moving coverage to a company owned by one of his law firm colleagues. He changed our banking relationships, consolidating accounts at a new institution where he had better connections. He renegotiated lease agreements for properties our family owned, somehow arranging for lower rents that went to, surprise, another shell company connected to Gabriel. Every change was presented as smart business strategy. Every document was legally bulletproof. Every transaction had Mama's official authorization signed on her bad days when she could barely remember her own address. "You're doing such good work handling the administrative details," Gabriel told me during one of his increasingly frequent business reviews. "It's exactly the kind of behind-the-scenes support the family needs." Behind the scenes. That's where Gabriel wanted me, invisible and uninformed. Isabella played her part perfectly, creating social media content that made it look like our family was more successful than ever. Photos of her in designer outfits at business meetings, videos of her trying new menu items at restaurants Gabriel was systematically looting, posts about exciting changes coming to Martinez Restaurant Holdings. Her followers ate it up. Comments poured in about how inspiring it was to see a young woman taking over the family business, how beautiful she looked in her new office, how lucky she was to have such a successful older brother guiding her. What they didn't see was Gabriel moving millions of dollars through fake companies. They didn't see him selling our mother's life's work to himself for below-market prices. They didn't see Isabella helping him isolate and manipulate our increasingly confused mother. And they definitely didn't see me making copies of every document, recording every conversation, and slowly building a case that would destroy them both. Gabriel thought he was so clever, using his legal training to steal everything while staying technically within the law. He never considered that the simple sister doing his paperwork might be smarter than she appeared. The truth about Gabriel and Isabella's partnership hit me like a slap across the face, and it happened in the most mundane way possible. I was working late at the restaurant, going through Gabriel's consulting invoices for the third time, when Isabella's phone rang in the office next door. She must have thought I'd gone home already. "Hey," she answered in a voice I'd never heard before, sharp, calculating, completely different from her usual breathy social media persona. No, she's still buying it completely. Sophia's so focused on the paperwork that she hasn't figured out what we're really doing. I froze, my hand stopping mid-calculation. "Of course the doctor thing is working," Isabella continued. "Men are so predictable. A few low-cut tops and some batting eyelashes, and Dr. Patterson will write whatever medical reports we need. Mama's dementia is getting worse right on schedule." My blood turned to ice as I realized what I was hearing. "Gabriel, relax. I've been managing the family dynamics since I was 16. Remember how we got rid of Sophia's college scholarship? Remember how we convinced Papa that her business ideas were too risky? This is just a bigger version of the same game." I crept closer to the wall between our offices, my heart pounding so hard I was afraid she'd hear it. "Look, I know the poisoning seems extreme, but it's working perfectly. The medication combination makes her confused enough to sign whatever you put in front of her, but not sick enough to end up in the hospital where real doctors might figure out what's happening." Poisoning. Isabella had just admitted to poisoning our mother. "Stop worrying about Sophia," Isabella said with a laugh that chilled me to the bone. "She's been the weak sister her whole life. Even if she suspects something, she'll never have the courage to do anything about it. She's not like us." I listened to Isabella wrap up the call, making plans to meet Gabriel later to discuss the timeline for the final phase. After she hung up, I heard her moving around, and then her voice returned to its usual sweet tone as she made another call. "Hi, Dr. Patterson. It's Isabella Martinez," she cooed. "I was wondering if you had time to discuss Mama's condition tomorrow? Maybe over dinner? I'm so worried about her, and you're the only one who really understands what we're going through." I sat in the dark office, pieces of a horrible puzzle finally clicking into place. Gabriel and Isabella hadn't suddenly decided to betray the family. They'd been planning this for years, maybe decades. I thought back to our childhood and started seeing patterns I'd missed completely. When I was 17, I'd received a full scholarship to study business at UCLA. I was excited to finally get out from under my siblings' shadows and build something of my own. But 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave, the scholarship was suddenly revoked. The financial aid office said there had been irregularities in my application. Gabriel had been working part-time at a law firm that summer. Isabella had been volunteering in the high school administrative office. When I was 25, I'd developed a business plan for expanding our catering services to corporate clients. I'd spent months researching the market, building cost projections, and preparing presentations. Papa was excited about the idea and ready to invest in the expansion. Then Gabriel came home from law school for Christmas and convinced Papa that the plan was too aggressive and would overextend our resources. Isabella supported him, saying she'd heard from her college friends that corporate catering was getting oversaturated. My expansion idea died, but 6 months later, Gabriel suggested a different expansion strategy that was almost identical to mine. Papa loved it. At family celebrations, Gabriel and Isabella would share inside jokes and meaningful looks that excluded me. When decisions needed to be made about the business, they'd discuss options privately before presenting a united front to our parents. When I tried to contribute ideas or opinions, they'd politely dismiss them or redirect the conversation. I'd always assumed they were just closer to each other because they were both more outgoing and charismatic than me. I never considered that they might be actively working to marginalize me. Isabella's social media success wasn't accidental either. Gabriel had used his legal connections to help her secure brand partnerships and collaborations. He'd negotiated her contracts and protected her from online legal issues. In return, Isabella used her platform to create the perfect public image of our family, successful, close-knit, and thriving under Gabriel's leadership. Her innocent, beauty-focused content was the perfect cover for someone who was actually cold-blooded enough to slowly poison our mother. The final piece fell into place when I remembered Isabella's college major, chemistry, with a focus on pharmacology. She'd always claimed she just wanted to understand skincare and nutrition for her beauty content. But you don't need a chemistry degree to promote face masks and protein powder. You need it to know exactly which combination of medications will cause cognitive impairment without being immediately fatal. I sat there in the dark office, finally understanding that my siblings weren't just stealing from our family. They were murderers, and I was the only one who knew it. After overhearing Isabella's phone call, I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. I sat in the dark restaurant office until dawn, trying to process the fact that my siblings were systematically murdering our mother. But by the time the sun came up, my shock had transformed into something colder and more focused: determination. If Gabriel and Isabella thought they could destroy our family while treating me like I was too stupid to notice, they were about to learn how wrong they'd been about their weak little sister. I started with Isabella's chemistry background. A quick search through her college records, which I could access through the restaurant's educational scholarship program, confirmed what I'd suspected. She hadn't just majored in chemistry, she'd specialized in pharmacological interactions and had written her senior thesis on undetectable methods of cognitive impairment through prescription drug combinations. The thesis was publicly available through the university library. Reading it felt like finding a blueprint for exactly what was happening to Mama. Isabella had researched which medications, when combined in small doses, could mimic the symptoms of early-onset dementia. She'd studied how long it would take for such combinations to cause permanent damage, and she'd identified the precise dosages that would impair cognitive function without triggering immediate medical intervention. My sister hadn't stumbled into poisoning our mother. She'd spent 4 years in college learning how to do it perfectly. That weekend, I drove to an electronics store 2 towns over and bought the smallest recording devices I could find. I told the clerk I was worried about elderly abuse in a nursing home where my grandmother lived. He was very helpful, explaining how the devices worked and recommending the models with the longest battery life. I spent Sunday afternoon installing the devices throughout Mama's house. One in the kitchen where Isabella prepared her special meals. One in the living room where Gabriel conducted his business meetings with Mama. One in Mama's bedroom, hidden inside a picture frame she'd never move. Then I waited. The recordings were devastating. "Just take the pills, Mama," Isabella's voice, sweet and patient. "Dr. Patterson said they'll help with your memory problems. I know they make you sleepy, but that's normal." "I don't want to take any more pills, mija," Mama's voice, weak and confused. "They make me feel strange." "The doctor knows what's best. Here, I brought you some of that soup you love. Take the pills first, then you can eat." I listened to Isabella coaxing Mama to take medications that weren't prescribed by any doctor. I heard her timing the dosages to coincide with Gabriel's visits, ensuring Mama would be at her most confused when important documents needed to be signed. Gabriel's recordings were just as incriminating. "I know you're tired, Mama, but we need to take care of this business with the Sunset Boulevard property. The buyer is offering excellent terms, but we need to act quickly." "I don't remember agreeing to sell that restaurant," Mama's voice, struggling to focus. "We discussed it last week, remember? You said it made financial sense to consolidate our holdings. I have the papers right here. You just need to sign where I've marked." I heard the scratching of a pen, followed by Gabriel's satisfied voice. "Perfect. Don't worry about the details, Mama. That's what I'm here for." But the most horrifying recording came from a conversation between Gabriel and Isabella when they thought Mama was napping. "How much longer?" Gabriel asked. "Dr. Patterson says the current medication levels should cause significant cognitive decline within 6 to 8 weeks," Isabella replied clinically. "After that, we can increase the dosages without it seeming suspicious. And the timeline for the final stage? I'm thinking another heart medication added to the mix. At her age and current condition, cardiac arrest would seem completely natural. Maybe during one of her confused episodes when she might accidentally take too many pills." "Perfect. And the new will? Already prepared. Miguel doesn't suspect anything. He thinks Mama changed her mind about the inheritance because she's worried about Sophia's ability to handle business responsibilities." I sat in my car in the restaurant parking lot, listening to my siblings casually plan our mother's murder, and felt something break inside me. But it wasn't my spirit that broke. It was my last connection to the naive woman who'd spent 34 years believing her family loved her. From that moment on, I stopped being Sophia the forgotten sister and became Sophia the hunter. I hired a private investigator to follow Gabriel and Isabella. I collected Mama's medication bottles and had their contents tested at 3 different laboratories. I photographed every document Gabriel brought for Mama to sign. I traced the ownership of his shell companies and documented every fraudulent transaction. Most importantly, I started visiting Mama more frequently, bringing her meals I'd prepared myself and quietly switching out the medications Isabella was giving her with harmless vitamins that looked identical. Mama's condition improved dramatically once the poisoning stopped, which terrified Gabriel and Isabella. They started talking about accelerating the timeline. That's when I knew I was running out of time to save our mother's life. And that's when I realized saving her might not be enough. I needed to destroy Gabriel and Isabella completely. Miguel Santos looked like he was going to be sick as he stared at the evidence spread across his conference table. The recording of Gabriel and Isabella planning Mama's murder was still playing when the conference room door opened. 2 FBI agents walked in, followed by Detective Martinez from the local police department. "Gabriel Martinez and Isabella Martinez," Detective Martinez said formally. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, fraud, and embezzlement." Gabriel shot to his feet, his lawyer instincts finally kicking in. "This is ridiculous. You can't arrest us based on illegally obtained recordings." "Actually," I said calmly, pulling out another folder, "the recordings were completely legal. Mama gave me written permission to install security devices in her home after she started suspecting someone was drugging her food." I handed Detective Martinez a notarized document in Mama's handwriting, dated 3 weeks before her death. "That's impossible," Isabella said, her voice cracking. "Mama was completely confused by then. She could barely remember our names." "Mama was confused on the days you poisoned her," I corrected. "But on the days I brought her clean food and switched out her medications, she was perfectly lucid. Lucid enough to realize what you two were doing to her." I opened my final folder and pulled out a video recording device. "Mama wanted you to see this," I said, connecting it to Miguel's television screen. Our mother's face appeared on the screen, sitting in her living room chair, looking tired but clear-eyed and determined. "If you're watching this," she said directly to the camera, "then something has happened to me, and my children Gabriel and Isabella are probably trying to claim my estate." Gabriel made a choking sound. Isabella started crying, real tears this time. "I know they've been poisoning me," Mama continued. "My daughter Sophia figured it out and helped me understand what was happening. For the past month, I've been pretending to take the medications Isabella gives me while actually taking vitamins that Sophia provided." The video showed Mama holding up pill bottles. "Sophia had these tested. Isabella has been giving me a combination of Ambien, antipsychotics, and blood pressure medications that would cause confusion and memory loss. My own daughter has been slowly killing me." Gabriel lunged toward me. "You turned our mother against us!" Agent Rodriguez stepped between us. "Sir, I need you to remain calm." On the screen, Mama was still talking. "Gabriel, you used my confused state to steal millions from the business I built with my own hands. You created fake companies to buy my restaurants from yourself. You forged documents and manipulated my medical records." She looked directly into the camera. "Isabella, you studied chemistry in college specifically to learn how to poison me. I found your thesis, mija. I read every word about undetectable cognitive impairment. You planned this for years." The room was completely silent except for Isabella's sobbing. "I'm leaving everything to Sophia," Mama said firmly. "Not because she's perfect, but because she's the only one who truly loved me instead of just wanting what I could give her. She's the only one who tried to save me instead of destroy me." The video ended with Mama holding up a legal document. "This is my real will, written in my own hand and witnessed by 3 people Gabriel and Isabella don't know. Everything I built belongs to Sophia now." Miguel examined the document with shaking hands. This is definitely your mother's handwriting, and the witnesses' signatures are notarized properly." "The will you read earlier was forged," I explained. "Isabella created it using samples of Mama's handwriting from when she was heavily medicated. But Mama wrote her real will during one of her clear periods, with witnesses who can testify to her mental competence." Detective Martinez was handcuffing Gabriel, who looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. "Sophia, please," he said desperately. "We're family. We can work this out. I'll give back everything I took." "You can't give back Mama's life," I replied. "And you can't give back the 20 years you spent treating me like I was worthless." Isabella was handcuffed next, still crying. "I never meant for it to go this far. Gabriel said we were just going to make her sign some papers." "I have recordings of you researching heart medications to add to Mama's food," I said. "You were planning to kill her within the week." As the agents led my siblings away, Gabriel turned back one last time. "How?" he asked. "How did you figure it all out?" I stood up and gathered my folders calmly. "You both made the same mistake Mama warned me about years ago," I said. "You underestimated someone because you thought they were weak. You spent so long seeing me as the forgotten sister that you never considered I might be the most dangerous one." Miguel was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. "Sophia, you orchestrated this entire confrontation." "I spent 3 years collecting evidence and 6 months planning this moment," I confirmed. "Mama and I wanted to make sure Gabriel and Isabella couldn't hurt anyone else." As I walked out of the law office, I felt something I'd never experienced before: the satisfaction of perfect justice. Gabriel and Isabella had spent their lives believing they were smarter and stronger than everyone around them. But they'd forgotten that the person you ignore is often the person who sees everything, and sometimes the forgotten daughter is the one who remembers everything.